All right, it looks like we're live. So, Paul, thanks for coming on and taking the time to have a conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Would you mind telling us a little bit
No
about yourself
worries.
before we get started?
Sure. My name's Paul. I run a YouTube channel called Paulogia, and I'm a former Christian, and I look at the claims of Christians on my channel, which is sort of my thing. So, um, yeah, I left Christianity probably about 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago, and have kind of made it my quest to try and work through some of these issues that I was working through, and to share that on YouTube.
So, 5 years ago, that's relatively recently. What caused you to become a heathen like us, heathen like the rest of us?
Um, so I grew up in a Mennonite community background. And went to Bible school and did youth ministry for decades and worship ministry for decades. Um, and just due to the flux of my job, at one point, well, let me step back. So one of my things that I've done in my career is write comic books, and I was writing a graphic novel that involved dinosaurs, and it had to involve dinosaurs. And so I was a young Earth creationist, being growing up as I was. So yeah, 5 years ago, I believed everything Ken Ham said. Um, I thought, well, this is for a general audience. It wasn't for a Christian audience. So I should investigate a few facts about dinosaurs that those secular, terrible scientists believe, just so that I can pepper the book with some of that. Um, and as I dug in on that, there was starting to be, they had more evidence than I'd been led to believe they had. And so I sort of put a pin in that. But when that project was done, I had a bit of downtime between projects. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to go. I've never done anything other than take this on faith from my pastors and teachers. They just tell me there's evidence for young Earth. So I went with it, right? Um, so after investigating, I bought the Ken Ham books because they were the best ones available, apparently. They were the best young Earth creation defenses. And as I read those, it all kind of fell apart. Now we can go into more of that later. I should abbreviate the story a bit. But I suddenly had to investigate what actual secular scientists said because of like the Ken Ham answers, even to me, even though I believed them, seemed a little out there. Um, and slowly I lost my faith in young Earth creationism, which caused me to think, well, I've been taking a lot of things just on authority. What if I take the Bible without assuming that it's true? What if I just went in neutrally and took a look at it that way? And soon came to discover that I really didn't have good reasons to trust the Bible either, or to trust really any of the stuff I'd done. Um, so it was a very hard process. It meant losing a lot of family, a lot of friends, my ministry, and losing a lot of things. It was very expensive, but I had intellectual honesty at the end. So that's kind of a medium length version of the answer.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. Started off as a drawing cartoons like comic books. You said?
Yeah, graphic novel. Some of them are still for sale. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mesozoic is my dinosaur epic. If you want to look that up on Amazon.
yeah, that's really cool. But yeah, you said it was a really expensive journey. You lost a lot of relationships because of that.
Yeah. So when it finally became known, and unfortunately, I didn't control the circumstances of it becoming known. It kind of got
Wow.
outed before I was ready. Um, I basically all my business partners, um, all my friends, all my social network was all based around the church. As it is for a lot of people in faith. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just was the reality. Um, they didn't stick with me or try and convert me. It was a very quickly. Most of them fell away. There are my immediate family and some very close friends. Stuck with me and are still with me. But most of the people I knew and dealt with day to day, were suddenly no longer in my life. So that was the terrifying.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
But I mean, Uh, thankfully, I live in Calgary, which is a relatively major Canadian city, and I was able to find um, some secular clubs and alternatives. I took that initiative upon myself. I knew that I needed something, and so I was able to. Fortunately, live in a center where I was able to find some of that, and so I'm very grateful to the people who gave me a safe place to land. And I would say that this online community has since replaced a lot of that. I've made a lot of great friends. from being involved in the secular community online.
Yeah, awesome. So a lot of people face those problems of being in really religious communities and trying to find atheist allies that they can hang out with. How did you go about looking for other atheist communities that you could be a part of?
Literally, I went to Facebook and typed like Calgary atheists, and a couple of clubs came up. Um, I I was able to, um, and then they actually happened to have a couple of events coming up. They have like skeptics in the pub, so some so they get together and drink, right? So some pretty low bar events. Though, strangely enough, I didn't have my first drink until after I became an atheist. So I went decades and decades. So I was people had to teach me how to drink to go to these events. But yeah, so and then from there, it's tricky with some of those groups because you never know. Like atheism is a weird thing to it's a weird thing to have in common with people because there's not a lot to build on there necessarily. It's just like we just also don't believe. I also was involved though with a Living Without Religion support group early on, which then has a little bit more in common because it was mostly pastors and people like myself who have been like pretty heavily in ministry. So it's a little bit more common there. But um, literally, I think Facebook and meetup groups just look for the name of your town and secular or humanist or atheist is a great way to start. Even in the last 5 years, I've noticed a lot more clubs are sprung up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been growing a lot, especially with like the work of the Freedom from Religion Foundation and the Secular Students of America. Those guys have been really promoting atheism. Have been doing really great work to build up the community for the atheists. And you have too with the Faithless Forum, right? You're a part of the Faithless Forum, and that provides a pretty awesome opportunity for people to atheists and skeptics to come together in like a kind of a less formal conference to really just hang out and get to know people.
Yeah, I've only been to one so far. There have been two. I was at the last one, and I'm planning to go this year, upcoming again. But yeah, that was really fun to see people, not only other content creators, but people who you see in the chat and people you see, just leaving comments and all that kind of stuff. It very quickly bonded as a lot of friends, a lot of chance to meet everybody. The conference wasn't so huge yet, although I'm guessing next year it's going to be a lot bigger. So if you can make it, I think it'll be in Texas. It'll be in Texas somewhere. Um, if you can make it this year, I'd love to see you.
Yeah,
Buy
I
me a drink.
plan to. I signed up to the newsletter for the reminders because apparently it sold out like several times over for this year's event.
Last year it did, which is sort of what is giving the group. And as you can imagine, um, you know, with all the YouTube money we make, because we're just getting so rich on all that.
Right.
It's basically a
Lamborghinis.
bunch of it's basically a bunch of YouTubers pooling together our nickels to like book a room and stuff like that, right? So um, I think we'll have a little bit better confidence this year that we can probably get some backers to help us book a bigger room, based on last year's ticket sales. So hopefully that's the case.
Have you ever thought about inviting like apologists from the big apologetics groups to have conversations or debates at the events?
Um, that's an interesting question. Uh, I'm not on the planning committee or anything, but it would change the dynamic a little bit. I think it one of the things that it is right now is kind of a uh, we're all in this together kind of a situation. I think it would be a great keynote. Like last year, Rationality Rules and the Cosmic Skeptic sort of did the keynote debate. I feel like a theist in the keynote debate situation would probably work. But part of the vibe in the room is actually just this. We can all relax because we all have this thing in common.
Yeah,
Not that any Christian isn't welcome, and we had Ocean Keltoy there, who's obviously a theist,
polytheist.
and uh, and he seemed to get along with us pretty well. So and had fun. I think he had fun.
Yeah, I've actually been going to all the Christian conferences recently. There was one that was just held, the Rethink Apologetics here in Minnesota. I met Greg Kokel and those group and guys, and
Oh yeah.
they asked me like, are there any atheist conferences like this that we could go to? Because it's really cool to see atheists come to these, and the Christians should also go to the more atheist ones. I think it's something that our communities are really missing is that we don't intermingle enough and go to each other's events.
It would certainly be theist friendly. Like certainly, I cannot imagine based on the atmosphere that they would be that there'd be any kind of hostility towards it. It was more, yeah, definitely. If a theist wants to come, I'll buy them a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you go to
Yeah.
any other of the conferences like the Aaron Ross doing his like cruise thing like in a few months, right?
Yeah, no, I've gone to basically the Alberta-based ones, so the province that I live in. I go to tend to go to a lot of those, and we've been blessed to have like speakers like Matt Delahunty and Aaron Ra and stuff like that at our conventions here. But no, I haven't. If anyone wants me to come, that let me know. But I haven't done a lot of that. A lot of my career was going to comic book conventions when I worked in my movie and comic careers, and so I kind of got conventioned out there for a while. But maybe I could jump on the bandwagon again. San Diego Comic Con, where there's 150,000 people, is just kind of like overwhelming.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, how did you meet Shannon Q?
How did I meet Shannon Q? So, if for those of you who don't know Shannon Q, she has a YouTube channel, but even better than that, she has a Twitter account. And if, for those of you who don't follow her on Twitter, I don't know. There are a few people in this world who do Twitter better than Shannon does, and so I actually began to because she was interacting on Twitter with a number of the same people that I was interacting with. I kind of became just familiar with her name and avatar, um, and then Steve McRae had me on his channel back in 2017 um, because I was work to talk about some of the recent events about Eric Hoven's movie, which was still coming out at that point, and he just invited people from the chat to come on. And Shannon became brave enough because she wanted to help give me some advice on. I was actually also going to the Creation Museum and was going to meet Ken Ham, and so I was asking for general people to give advice, and she is a communications expert and kind of came on and gave me some tips. Anyway, so we met on Steve McRae Hangout, and then after that, we just kind of chatted because she was giving me such good advice and giving me such good help that of course we all like to use the resources around for us, and we from there she was helping me with the channel a little bit, do some research things, and we kind of hit it off from there. Yeah,
Cool. You said you were going to meet Ken Ham. Did you end up meeting him?
yeah, so I did. So I went to the Creation Museum and I picked a day strategically because I was going to be in Ohio in general, and so which is close enough to Kentucky, you can zip over. So I picked a day when they were recording their Answers News show, which, if anyone's familiar with my channel, Ham and Egg News is basically her reaction to their Answers News show. So I went on a day when I knew that was recording, and I know they do a bit of a meet and greet in the lobby afterwards. So um, I went incognito. My face hadn't been revealed. No, my face hadn't been revealed yet at that point. So I sat in the audience. I watched the show. I got to meet them afterwards, and I asked Bodie and Ken in Georgia if they ever were privy to what happens online with responses to theirs, and they were kind of giggling. Is yeah, some of these losers in their basement, just making fun of us. So I asked them if they'd ever seen the Ham and Egg News one, and they all laughed, and they were like, "Yeah, we've seen that one. That one's funny and great." Um, so I said, "Well, what message would you have for that guy?" And he said, "Well, that guy should move out of his mom's basement instead of just cashing these atheist checks." So I kind of laughed and let it go. But anyway, if anyone wants on my channel, I forget the name of the video, but it's about 2 years ago where I meet Ken, and I have that as a video posted, so you can
Oh,
check that out.
awesome. I definitely have to check that out. That sounds
Yeah.
hilarious. Have you talked, you've done some with like Kent Hovind too, like on Modern Day Debate. You've talked with him a little bit?
Um, I have never actually personally. Shannon has, and I generally avoid Kent. I talk to Eric a lot, his son, but Kent has recently, for some reason, taken an interest in my channel in the last couple of weeks, and so he started doing response videos to me randomly out of the blue. Um, so, I mean, maybe that'll happen, but I don't know. Like, have you debated Kent?
Yeah, 3 times, I think.
Yeah. Like, how do you feel that was forward progress made in any way, or was it just an hour of fun?
Well, actually, every one of my interactions with Kent have been really productive. Like he's engaged with what I've said, and he's been honest and respectful about what we're talking about. He only seems to be really combative when you do the Aaron Raw thing and just attack him
Mm,
on everything. But when you're like open and honest and let him talk, he seems to be really open to having an open dialogue and conversation.
cool. I've seen a couple of, there have been a few people who've handled him well, and I think they're probably the more specific the topic, the better, probably with him. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, I think as long as you don't get too into the details of the science, because you have such different starting assumptions with his scientific worldview and your scientific worldview. You have to go with
Mm.
like very broad philosophical topics that you both agree with. Like one thing I got him on was I asked, so if you just add one plus one plus one plus one, and you keep adding one, eventually you're going to get to a trillion, right? And he's like, yes, of course. So then, if evolution works that way, we could get big changes over time. It's like, well, I mean, if it worked that way, sure. So as long as
Mm.
you keep it simple, he can understand it. But if you go into the science or something, he gets into a script, and that's where it kind of goes off the rails.
Well, I'm very familiar with his scripts because his son Eric, early in Eric's career, he was basically doing his dad's material. So I've certainly familiar with that and some of those slides and things. Um, I did the I took the tact with his last response to me of I just instead of making a response video, I left a really long comment in his comment section. But I went with as like polite and as charitable as I could because I've seen so many people go into him ripping him apart. So I'm trying to take the reverse tact. I'm trying to be as charitable and as amiable so that we can get rid of the weird ad hom stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, like he went after me for being a cartoon pretty hard, which is common. Um, and then he saw my face and decided that I was too young for him to deal with, which is weird because I'm old. So, but whatever. I didn't return any of that. I'm not returning the ad hom stuff. I'm not talking about his 9 year vacation or any of those kind of things. Right? It's just keep it
Inmate
on the
number
topic.
9572, whatever, the Aaron
Yeah,
Rob.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see. Because um, I would obviously it's his audience that I would love to be able to reach, not him himself. He's
Yeah,
too
absolutely.
invested. So,
Yeah, and all the debates I think he posts on his channel, which has like 150,000 subs, which is just
which is
crazy.
crazy. But Christians love subscribing to things. I don't know if you've noticed that. um, there's some huge Christian channels that get very few views. Um, I don't know what thing is. Although I think Christians love Facebook better.
Yeah.
That's where they that's where they live.
Yeah, and the networking between the communities is always really good. Like Capturing Christianity, What Do You Meme, and Mike Winger all did like a big collaboration thing, and they all got like tens of thousands of subs from that because they work together really
Mm,
well. I think that's something
right.
the atheist community is really missing. We have a lot of infighting, like especially with Steve McRae and all of that stuff. We don't have a lot of collaborations between big channels like you and Shannon. I think is really cool that you guys collaborate the way you do.
I uh I never intended to be a collaboration channel, but suddenly um, I got bored of doing Answers News, so it became great to have subject matter experts on. So I kind of became this place where everyone gets to be a cartoon if they're a subject matter expert on something. So no, I agree and disagree. I think maybe I'm just blinders on because I tend to watch Christian material, not atheist material. I don't know about you, but I think we collab pretty well. There's always room for improvement, and I think places like Faithless Forum. If you are a creator, um, and you are obviously Tom, but anyone else in your audience, Faithless Forum was a great kickoff to a lot of collabs as well. Because when you meet someone face to face, uh, you can build your relationship stronger going into the future. I think so. Um, yeah, go to conventions if you want to collab.
Networking, yeah.
Networking, yeah,
So what
basic
got you?
strategies.
What inspired you to start your channel, your YouTube channel?
Mm. So, um, becoming an part of becoming an atheist and losing my faith was that I ended up um, also being removed from. There was a split in my home. I split with my wife at the time, and the kids, the custody of the kids, and my relationship with the kids, who are all very serious Christians and still are, became somewhat tenuous and not to be too much of a downer, but I also got very sick at the time, and it was literally to the extent was I wasn't sure how long I was going to live. So my channel very much became a um, place that I wanted to leave messages for my kids. So my earliest videos are very much just foundational. Here's the gradual steps I took, and topics that I learned. And it was really just the time capsule for them in case I wasn't around long enough to actually have the conversations with them. Um, Combined with, I have a background in film and animation. And being sick, I didn't think I was camera. Um, I wasn't pretty. I'm not pretty now, never will be, but I was even less pretty when I was sick. So the cartoon became a sort of a natural thing that I could throw up there and not have my appearance be a barrier, at the time. So that's kind of where the animation stuff came from. Is that an answer? I don't know if that's an answer.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's kind of how it started.
But I disagree. I think you are very pretty. You look very much like Mark Hamill. Like when I look at you, I see Mark
Mm,
Hamill. Have you ever heard
I
that
get that a
before?
lot.
Yeah.
I get that a lot. Um, when I started my channel, I didn't have hair because of medicine and things, so it was weird. But thank you. I'll take it. Mark's a. I think some of your audience may know that I worked for Lucasfilm for a long time.
Oh really?
I did. So Mark's a great guy, and
You
and
you
I'm
were
very
you were
excited for.
you were his stunt double, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I wish. Yeah, I know that I was there for the prequel era stuff. I was there for episode one, two, and three, which is not everyone's favorite, but
What? Really? No, people don't like
what?
that. What?
But yeah, it was fun to work with the original cast. Sometimes when we would do DVD promotions and things like that. We did, um, obviously the special editions and things. So yeah, I was privileged to meet a few of those people, and they're great.
Yeah, that's really cool. I did not know that about you.
Yeah,
So how did you come up with your name, Paulogia? It's like apologia, but with Paul.
pretty much exactly right. Well, there was enough people who were named Godless something or other at the time, and all that kind of stuff. Um, I also had enough foresight to know that I didn't just want to deal with young Earth creationism, and I maybe wanted to leave it open a little bit more. So yeah, having been a Bible school student myself, apologia is the Greek for, you know, to make a defense for something. And since I wanted to kind of pick apart the Christian defenses, and my name was Paul, that was literally it. So, um, although a lot of people suggest that I should name my channel Sologia because I've reverted backwards, so it's a
Yeah,
good suggestion. But
in reference to the
apologia it is.
Bible, Paul and Saul and his conversion to
Correct.
Christianity.
Yeah. Though someone's been challenging me recently that Saul was just his Jewish name and that it wasn't really a conversion. But in the Christian tradition I was in, Saul became Paul when he converted. So
Are your favorite kinds of arguments to deal with and rebut are things like the historicity of the Bible and the claims in the Bible, as opposed to like the deeper philosophical arguments?
yes, largely because for me it was the deconstruction of the Bible as a reliable work that most convinced me. So like I growing up in the faith, like the Kalam wasn't something I that turned me into a Christian. Like I became a Christian because my whole community was Christians, right? So I think we all kind of end up focusing on or enjoy most of those things that most impacted us. So yeah, the Bible history stuff for me, authorship of the New Testament, how we got the books of the Bible, the authorship of the Pentateuch, all those kind of things to me are the most fascinating.
Yeah, I recently was watching your conversation with Inspiring Philosophy. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, on divine hiddenness.
Yep, the one last night.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't love debates. I know you do. You're a debate. You love debates. You do one right now if I challenge you to something. Um, but I like discussions, and so I was thankful that Mike was open to doing such. And so he did a video on divine hiddenness. I responded. He wrote a blog, and I realized we were just talking past each other. So really, all I wanted to do was for us to see what would happen if we would like be in a room, figure out where we're definitionally not matching. So like I don't know if any progress is made. I don't like I think in reading the comments, it's still pretty like Christians think IP won and atheists think I won. And I think, well, it wasn't a winning thing. It was just a
A way
chance to
to
chat
clarify
through.
your ideas.
Yeah, I mean, he, I think rightfully so. He objects to Schellenberg, who created the formal divine hiddenness argument. Have you ever debated on divine hiddenness, by the way?
It's come up as like a side argument. It's never been like the focus, but a little
Okay.
bit.
But Mike's version of it used the word reasonable unbelievers. And I just rolled with that, even though Schellenberg says non-resistant non-believers. And I was just treating them in my video as synonymous. But IP very much was then bringing in psychological research saying, well, none of us make decisions entirely reasonably. None of us make any decision completely without devoid of emotion. And of course, I would agree with that. I would agree that any decision we make has multiple factors, some of which we're aware of, some of which we're probably even not. Like, right? Like sometimes we might make one decision because the room is warmer than we think. Uh, right? So I disagree there. What I do disagree with, and I continue to disagree with him, is that there is always some level of information, hard facts, that can overcome our biases. So no matter how badly I want to believe, for example, that my house is still standing, if I come home and it's on fire and not here, that's going to overcome my beliefs. That's maybe a bad example. The faithful spouse is often a good example, right? You can walk in on your spouse being unfaithful, and suddenly all your preconceived notions are gone. Um, I don't know. Where do you think that is the case? Do you think there's always amount of information, or are some people just so stuck that it can't be fixed?
I think it depends like the level of the mental ability, because I think that some people, if they don't have the cognitive ability to really understand what they're seeing, then they won't be able to do it. But I think that as long as you have the ability to think clearly and you're not like mentally handicapped, then I think you should always be able to be changed by certain kinds of facts. But there's also certain kinds of emotional delusions where people will see someone cheating, but they'll just say, oh, well, that was just an illusion, or maybe they were just doing it for me, or they'll try and justify it in some way to
Mm.
rationalize their belief to make it that's what's not the case. Like people who think of conspiracy theories like the 9/11 conspiracy theory, or flat earthers who see evidence and they explain it away some way. I think that there's always a way to explain it away if you're convicted enough to be able to try and find a way to think about it like that. But I think it's a very small minority of people who have those kinds of conditions.
Well, my argument for my conviction about the divine hiddenness argument, it follows that really the way Schellenberg lays out his syllogism is that there need only be one person in history who is a non-resistant non-believer for God, for this to be an effective argument. In Matthew, Jesus tells the parable of the lost sheep, where it's like, well, if I would leave the 99 to go fetch the one, if there was one lost sheep, I think the scripture would lay into the definition that God wants everyone to be saved in the God of the Bible, right? And so all you need is one non-resistant non-believer in history for it to be compelling to me to say, well, that means that what we think of as a loving God doesn't exist. I don't think we can extrapolate the argument further than the idea of a loving God. You would probably agree that there are many constructions of gods that are not loving, to whom the divine hiddenness argument wouldn't even apply.
Right, the
That
spaghetti monster for one.
right, right. This spaghetti monster doesn't want a relationship with us, so he can stay as hidden as he wants, or she, or they, or I don't know what the pronoun for the flying spaghetti monster is. But
Right, yeah, my position is that I mean, I think most atheists are non-resistant non-believers. I think that we are open to the idea that there could be a God, and if we're presented with enough evidence, we'd believe it. But then again, I think of the counter argument to that is that if there was evidence of the Christian God, I'd think it's a really terrible being. Like all the stuff it did in the Old Testament, I'm like, that's an evil being. So even if I acknowledge it exists, I probably still wouldn't believe in it. So when I
well,
think most,
that's actually my argument for it is that like often the argument that's thrown back is, well, what about free will? If you knew God existed, everyone will just worship him, and then free will's out the window. I'm like, no. I think there's lots of people who would uh, happy to acknowledge him and not worship. Like the Bible itself is full of characters
yeah, like,
who had perfect knowledge of God. Satan, for example. Yeah. So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah.
yeah, absolutely, no problem. So what are your plans for the future? Are you working on anything right now?
So one of my big plans for the future, obviously, I'm doing a few more videos this month. Is a series specifically about. So mostly I do reactions. If anyone watches my channel, you know that I generally react to things. I actually have a series that I've been working on for about a year now. That is purely just my research on how we constructed the Bible So who the authors are, when it was written, um, what the different theories are about how it was assembled, and all that kind of stuff, and where it landed in history. That won't be reaction videos. That will be just purely me um, presenting research, talking, and doing a lot of animation. The trouble is that it's a lot of work to, especially my first one. I want to do an overview of the entire New Testament, which is 27 different books. It's really, I know people think about the New Testament, we'll just do the New Testament, but there's 27 different arguments to be made about the 27 different things in there. So, um, yeah, that's one of my big things for next year. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of people that I would enjoy, collaborating with in the next year, and I'm kind of starting to put my head together on some of those things. Um, but mainly going forward, I'd love to, like a lot of us, I would love to be able to spend more of my time doing it. So we'll see if I can somehow leverage YouTube's crazy algorithms and patrons and stuff to allow me time to have more of that. But yeah.
So have you thought about like talking with Bart Ehrman or the other historiographers in that field to like bring them on your channel and talk with about the origin and the who wrote the Gospels, the New Testament, the Old Testament?
Um, I would love to. I would very much. Bart Ehrman in particular would obviously be a person I would love to chat with. I know that sometimes it's interesting because sometimes there's resistance within Christians to like listen to him, for example. So I'm actually trying to, whenever I'm using him as a source, I actually try and go find what his sources were, because his sources are usually Christian. Um, and so I go back to those. But obviously, I admire Bart greatly, and his. I feel like he's a very intellectually honest individual. Um, but no, I'd rather talk to someone I disagree with. Like I'd rather talk to Mike Lacona or Gary Habermas or people like those.
What do you think about Jonathan Sheffield? He's done a lot of research in the origin and historicity.
Jonathan is an interesting individual. um, Jonathan, his research is rigorous. He has pointed me to sources I didn't know existed on things. But so, for example, um, the reason that the book of Matthew has the name Matthew on it is because Eusebius quoted Plebius. Please, no, not Eusebius. Eusebius quoted a guy who spoke about a gospel of Matthew, but the gospel of Matthew that he's describing was written in Hebrew. Um, but people kind of wave that away, even though the gospel of Matthew that we have is written in Greek. So we call it maybe the first gospel. People decided, well, we know that Matthew wrote a gospel, or we think that Matthew wrote a gospel. We have this gospel without a name. Let's match those together, even though it doesn't make. Anyway, Jonathan argues vigorously that Matthew was written in Hebrew first, and that what we have is a translation, even though large sections of it copy from Mark, which were obviously written in Greek. So, like, how he gets around some of those things, um, it's not disingenuous because he believes it, but it's not a line of logic I can follow. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I usually stay away from all the historiography stuff because there's so many ways you can interpret it. It's very vague. You can't really like prove it one way or the other. It's a lot of arguing about semantics and very detailed stuff that you really need to be a professional academic in the field with all the sources and the history to really be able to have a compelling argument. And everyone listening to you is just like, I have no idea what either of them is saying.
Yeah. But yeah, Jonathan makes some arguments that um, I don't even know of other Christians who make the arguments that he makes. Um, and one of the things that I'm trying to do is I fair or not, like no one Christian speaks for Christians, right? Like every video I make responding to someone's like, well, Frank Turek's an idiot or William and Craig's an idiot. Like Christians will throw the person under the bus that I'm talking about. Um, but the best I can do is go with the influencers, right? The best I can do is find the videos that have a lot of views, the authors that sell a lot of books. And I know that if you sell 1 million books, that's only 1% of Christians that have read it or less. But still, that's the best we can do. So, but even
Assuming the people who actually bought the book actually
sure,
read it.
or at least sold them, yeah. Um, once you get to someone like Jonathan who holds ideas that I can't even find in a mainstream Christian book, while it can be fun, it's not as maybe not as relevant to my audience and worth as much of my time.
Are there? You mentioned you'd like to talk with Mike Lacoma and Gary Habermas. Are there any other really big Christians you'd really like to have on your channel?
Oh boy. Well, anyone I've responded to, frankly, I would love to have on. I would love to have Eric Hovind on. I would, because I think I would just love to be able to try and figure out what he believes and what he's just doing. But like on a more rigorous end, like Peter Enns is a Christian who I really um, he was almost the one when I was reading his book on historical Adam was almost the one that kept me in Christianity. Um, Hugh Ross, I think, is a fascinating person. Um,
Have you
I mean,
invited either of them on? Because I got them on my channel.
I have not. I have not because I tend to just do these responses. But you're you're making me think I should probably do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I tend to do my conversations over on Shannon's channel. She's kind of in charge of that. But
But yeah, Pete Enns, he's open to, he's available. You can just email him. He came on my channel like real quick.
cool. And you know, one that love to talk to Franklin Graham because I need to know what's going on there. But I don't know, or I mean, frankly, anyone. But those are the ones in my head would be kind of wish list type.
What do you mean by Franklin Graham? You need to know what's going on.
So Franklin Graham, I when I was a believer, Franklin Graham was someone I very much followed and agreed with his ideas. But I feel like even if I was a believer now, I wouldn't follow his ideas. So he's one of the lead spiritual advisors for Trump, um,
Wow.
and he has. It feels like he's just really just changed his position for this political position and a lot of that stuff. And I'm really not usually interested in politics as it relates to religion because that's not helpful in my view. Like for what I'm trying to do, um, but Franklin Graham is a fascinating case for me because it's Billy Graham's son. Billy Graham was big in my family. We would watch Billy Graham videos and movies. And anyway, but Franklin, just his all in on Trumpness and his basically war on the left or whatever. Like he seems to have shifted away from even caring, in my opinion, what Jesus would say about some of these things. So to me, it would be he doesn't do a lot of interviews either. So I would just love to see what if he feels like he's carrying on his dad's legacy right now or not, or some of those kind of things.
Yeah, wow. Especially, yeah, I can understand a disinterest in politics because it's such a hostile climate, especially now. It seems like it turns more people off than really gets people to have honest conversations.
Being Canadian, I have the luxury of being somewhat watching it as a spectator as opposed to someone who's actually going to get hit with whatever happens. So, um, but yeah, I watch it. I watch it as a spectator, not as a
Uh,
pugilist.
Until Trump tries to like buy Alberta or something.
It could be. Yeah, we have more oil than most of the places he's going to war for. So
Yeah. So what other kind of stuff do you do for fun?
for fun, well, I'm a dad. Obviously, that takes. I'm a half-time, full-time. I'm a half-time single dad, so half the time they're here. Um, so I spend a lot of time doing. We play a lot of board games. I'm hugely into movies. My career used to be, you know, obviously Star Wars related and movie related. So, uh, you know, when I'm watching other things, I used to have a channel actually that discussed uh, nerd movies, stuff like that. So I love shows like Watchmen that are on now, or The Mandalorian, stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, I've been watching that one. That one's really good.
Um, and I'm also a huge I'm a sports fan too, which is weird because it seems like most of the people in his community just call it sports ball and leave it at that. But NFL football and NHL hockey primarily, and a lot of the other sports, you know, are fun for me too. So yeah.
Do you do a lot of skating? And
So no, my mother. I said I'm not going to talk about my mom as much. Let me just. When I was a kid, safety concerns about me kept me from skating somewhat, and I also just wasn't good. So no, I played football. I played yeah, but I didn't. The skating weirdly as a Canadian, I'm not a big skater.
yeah, I actually just started learning how to do it. I went skating for the first time like last week.
Oh, and then today's
Yep.
is there? Well, hopefully there's at least someone's hand to hold. That's often a good motivator.
But yeah, I've actually been doing like rollerblading a lot, so I'm pretty good at it
Mm.
starting off.
Okay.
I only fell like 3 times. We're good.
Well, it's safer on ice, strangely enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you don't skin your knee and stuff. You're usually wearing enough gear to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I actually found rollerblading is a lot easier because it's easier to grip and because the blades are like flat as opposed to the curved skates.
Okay.
So what's your favorite movie? You said you're a big movie guy.
Uh, so weirdly, the one that often comes to mind is Michael Mann's Heat, starring De Niro, Robert De Niro, and Val Kilmer, and a lot of great people. I love that movie. I can watch it anytime. But no, I mean, as a genre fan, like The Empire Strikes Back is up there for me. The Lord of the Rings films were fascinating for me. I was sort of in the film industry when those were happening. Godfather films are amazing. My tastes are all over the map. Um, I also was doing a little bit of work with Pixar, so a lot of that stuff I love. Um, I always wanted to be an animator, and so I've been involved with visual effects and things like that. Um, so anything animated is great. So my tastes are everywhere from lighthearted family to dark stuff. I'm a DC guy over a Marvel guy, but I kind of have fallen in love with the Marvel universe versus what's going on with DC. They're not handling Batman right.
The Affleck Batman.
Affleck was actually good as I thought he was good as Bruce, but the scripts were so terrible. I am curious, as like, and obviously he didn't get to do the one that he wrote. I'm curious because he was a big fan of the source material and wrote a script that we'll never get to see. Well, maybe we'll see the script someday. I didn't mind Affleck's casting, but Snyder overstayed his welcome so long there. Although Man of Steel isn't as bad as most people think, in my opinion. Man of Steel isn't so terrible. I liked that again, weirdly, coming out of the secular stuff, like I liked that they were trying to give us, if an alien landed on Earth, like they gave us, like that, oh, the atmosphere wouldn't be exactly the same, and their lungs would have to at least adapt, and that the idea that you can have X-ray vision wouldn't come naturally to you immediately, like that you can see, you have to obviously consciously deal with focal depth that we don't deal with, like just a lot of those kind of ideas. I thought were pretty good.
Yeah, getting used to all the different sensory information that you haven't been privy to your entire life, and just
Right. I thought that was handled well. I thought I even I even didn't mind the relationship with the two dads kind of idea. Like I thought thematically um, that Jor-El and Clark and John Kent were so different that he had those two strong influences in his life and trying to find a balance between there. For me, coming out of religion, some of these things carry extra themes. Um, I even didn't hate Last Jedi as much as people. It's a bad film, like, but whatever. But I loved like this the whole thought of Yoda was just gonna let lightning strike. I mean, obviously they hid the books, but let the lightning burn it all down. And why are we spending our life trying to find answers in old books? We're supposed to be looking forward. Some of those themes I kind of liked, and I actually related to Luke, to angry old. Speaking of what I look like, um, sort of bitter old Luke made sense to me because I'm a bitter old man now. So it's the young optimists who don't understand why someone in his circumstances would be angry. I don't know. I
what is
have
your opinion of the prequels? A big fan because you worked on them. I don't know. Does it make you a little biased?
so the prequels are odd for me because I will never be able to watch them as a movie. So like for me, every scene is like, well, I remember meetings and meeting after meeting after meeting about each scene and being on set for filming it and like which actor was late for that scene. Like I can't really watch them uh, like a fan would, and I wish that I could. Um, I wasn't there for Phantom Menace theatrical release, so Phantom Menace would be the closest. Um, and for those of you who aren't old enough, like it was kind of like the first Star Wars in so long. We were kind of, I think, in denial that it was okay, but clearly it wasn't, and I didn't like midichlorians. Like the normal things that people didn't like. But if you just pod race Darth Maul over and over again, those are fun.
Yeah, I loved the battle with Darth Maul. That was one of my favorite lightsaber battles of all time.
Um, and obviously, Darth Maul, um, in the more expanded stuff, didn't die. And for those, and actually in the official things, Darth Maul is still kicking around. It'll be interesting to see if he's part of the new Obi-Wan series on Disney Plus or not.
Oh yeah, they go into it in the animated series. I think they actually fights Obi-Wan again, like way later when he's the old Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan finally
Yeah, in
kills
Rebels,
him.
and it was a very touching scene, because you got the lead up for like a whole season of the struggle of Darth Maul. Like you actually got, so it's not told from Obi-Wan's perspective at all. You get this long struggle with Darth Maul, and then he has this fight and he just loses again. And I love that variation in storytelling. It's not always hero's journey. It's not always, things don't always work out like that. If you have Disney Plus, I would actually encourage you to watch season 3 and 4 of Rebels. Um, yeah, they're really cool.
Or if you happen to know the current pirate sites that are not technically legal,
Yeah, well, but you might be playing Disney. You might be buying Disney Plus now. I don't know.
right? Well, actually, yeah, I really liked that fight because it was essentially like the same fight they did with Qui-Gon in the
Mm.
Star Wars movie, and it was just it was so epic just to see that again and recognize the history behind it, even though it was such a short fight.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I think Star Wars historically has done well was that, um, battles, they give you enough weight in the emotional battles, emotion to so like for example the Terminator franchise has completely lost its ability to give us any kind of feeling of what's happening. It's just become two indestructible robots punching each other, right? So there's no emotional build up, and there's no emotional, we're not vested what happens. um if you just do special effects and if you just do fights for the sake of that, it doesn't get you anywhere. You have to invest in the characters first, which is one of the fascinating things about the new, now that we're telling a lot of stories on these streaming services where you get like 10 hours of material to tell a story, like the original Daredevil, like, well, the Netflix Daredevil season one, for example, you got to know someone for 6 hours first, and then you can care about when these gods are punching each other. You need some weight. I don't know. That's that's me ranting about things. But
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think I really enjoy TV series a lot more than movies because you get a lot more in depth and you get the connection with the characters, and it's a lot more meaningful than just seeing someone on screen die who's a big character. It's like Game of Thrones, I think, did it good for like the first few seasons, but then it just kind of got overbearing on the last few seasons. But
yeah.
I really like the
Um,
Castlevania series. I love the Netflix Castlevania series. That one was really good.
oh, I haven't seen that. I'll have to check it.
Yeah, I'm a big anime
Um,
fan, so
I think what I like now, and so Game of Thrones got stuck in the same thing that Lost got stuck in, was that we don't know how long it's going to go, so we have to start treading water. I like what Disney and Netflix and all these places are doing now. Is like, here's the number of seasons you're going to have, or here's the maximum number you're going to have, so you can work on an arc that actually tells the story, versus this is just popular, so we're going to tread water. Battlestar Galactica had the same issue towards the end, those kind of things. So I'm hoping that they stick to their guns. And
oh, there's also the pirate show Black Sails. I really love that one. That one was good too.
ooh, don't know that one. That one's cool.
Oh yeah,
That
absolutely.
Netflix or Amazon, or we don't know.
HBO.
HBO. Okay.
Or it was the history one, I think maybe I don't remember, but it was that the Black Sails. I loved that was a great pirate show. So yeah, if you haven't seen that one, check that one out for sure.
Uh, Deadwood, Ray Donovan, some of those kind of series are some more of that too.
Yeah. What are your favorite shows you're watching right now?
Yeah. Mandalorian's fun. Uh, the Ray Donovan season 7 is on now, which I really enjoy. Um, but the favorite thing I'm watching right now is Watchmen, and I didn't expect to like it. Watchmen graphic novel meant a lot to me when I read it first, and I didn't even. I was okay with, again, Zack Snyder. I was okay with what Zack Snyder did in the movie. Like, he made a lot of changes to make it work on a screen, but there was no giant squid dying and stuff. So it's interesting that the HBO series is a sequel to the comic, not a sequel to the movie. So you kind of have to know what the differences were there. But they've come up with some really cool storytelling, and some very interesting twists in Watchmen. So if you're a fan of the graphic novels, if you're a fan of that genre, yeah, I would recommend that.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on the movie. I like the story where the bad guy was actually doing the right thing the entire time and just like a twist ending. I really like that, but it was I think it was too conflated in the movie. Too much going on at the same time.
Well, the novel was never the Watchmen graphic novel was supposed to be sort of a deconstruction of what the essence of these heroes were, and if they had to work in real life, how they would work. Um, and then Zack Snyder said, "Well, I'm going to turn this thing that was supposed to be like a deconstruction of it and make it a legitimate superhero movie. Like, there's no scenes with like where they're twirling around with Owl and Silk Spectre twirling around in prison and punching people like crazy. Like, that's not in there. But like the psychology of a Rorschach, or who's a guy who's been abused all his life and was actually stood in for religion in the series, versus like the Ozymandias, who a friend of ours took his name from. The smartest man on Earth, who could see. In his way, he was the Thanos, right? He could make decisions based on greater good without being burdened by the morality of the individual, which was kind of just an interesting take. You had Anyway. There's a lot of interesting characters in there. Um, it was a weird that it was a graphic novel that dealt with sexual assault and things like that. For its time in the '80s, that was late '80s. It was a little different.
Yeah, pushing the bounds of what was socially
Pushing,
acceptable.
yeah. And one, it was like you can't the '66, the Batman where he's punching and it says "pow," like whatever, like that's what most people were thinking of superheroes, or the Superman, or this Christopher Reeve Superman. Um, that was the only thing people were thinking about with heroes, and they weren't dealing with the realities of it. Well, of course, now that's all the ever since Dark Knight trilogy, everything's got to be gritty.
Yeah,
So we'll see. The Wonder
I was a big fan of that. That was a really good series, the Heath
It
Ledger
was.
Joker.
It was. Although it was funny because Christian Bale didn't really do much in it. It's like he didn't really have much to do.
Yeah.
Um, the Wonder Woman '84 trailer came out yesterday, I think,
Oh yeah.
and DC's going back to light. It looks very Marvel-ish in terms of light tone. So I don't know. I'm. Uh,
Not a
did you
fan.
see the new Joker film?
The Heath Ledger one, or no, the
No, no, no.
Joaquin
The
Phoenix one.
Joaquin Phoenix one.
No, I haven't seen that. Uh, it hits a little too close to home for me. I have
Okay.
too much in my past that I don't. It's uncomfortable for me to watch that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Well, I would say it is absolutely. I would have said it's absolutely a film that you need to stay safe about. I actually had my own nervous thoughts about going into it as well. But it's just curious that DC is going in these two opposite directions. They've made this super super dark film. Now Wonder Woman is like just glossy like '80s stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, you said you're not a big fan of the way DC's going, but you're more of a fan. You're a Marvel fan, not a DC fan?
So in the comics, I'm a DC guy, like just all my life. Dick Grayson, Nightwing is my favorite character. Um, I I've always thought Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff was stupid, but the um, the
Spider-Man's
universe
stupid.
that
Yeah.
yeah, well the you when you get into this comic stuff, you kind of fall in one camp or the other, and you can't even read all your own stuff. So very few people read both, um, or at least in my day they didn't. Um, but the film stuff got off the rails where they were trying, like Justice League was just terrible. Um, and it seemed like it was creation of films by committee largely, and very much reacting to what audiences were saying, what everyone was doing, as opposed to Kevin Feige at Marvel was like, here's our plan. And even though, like, people forget, like the Iron Man and Thor and Captain America films didn't do that great, financially in the theatrical run, but they stayed the course. They like, no, we got to introduce these characters to people. These are the ones we have rights to. We have a long term plan, and they also made sure that each movie was its own movie. Like they didn't get lost in. DC got too quickly lost in we need to build this giant world to compete, but they didn't, so much so that like Suicide Squad was looking ahead of itself, and um, yeah, a lot of those films didn't take the time to make sure that each film was its own fun, unique thing. They were just trying to catch up. So I'm hoping they go back to it. Aquaman, even though it's not, I can't really watch that again. It was at least fun in its own. Oh, you made a movie that was a movie. At least we'll see. We'll see if they course correct. But no, I wish the DC stuff was better. But it's also interesting that the MCU after Endgame, I think it's gonna have to take a breather. I'm not sure everyone's in automatically for what's going on next. I feel like that was a collective sigh with Endgame, and maybe we'll see what happens with Scarlet, with Black Widow, um, coming up in May, I think. But um, man, I'm just talking about movies now. Uh, the we'll see. I think we'll see if the world now cares again. Like it kind of like we got done with that. Um, I'm not even sure Marvel can be Marvel anymore. We'll see.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the movies thing where there's some movies that shouldn't have sequels, like The Matrix. The first Matrix was just
Mm.
good,
Hmm.
and then it moves on to the sequel. And you're like, why? Why does this exist? It
Right.
would be so much better just to die at the first one.
There's a few of those where I've my kids have had the fortune of me like I just insist to them that Matrix 2 and 3 don't exist. You'll never watch them. There's a few of those sequels where my kids know just don't watch them because it wrecks the first one. Although there's a Ghostbusters trailer came out today, which is interesting. I don't know if you saw it.
I haven't seen it. No.
It's Ivan Reitman who is Egon. His son wrote the new one, and it ignores the girls one from last year. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I don't imagine it can do worse than the girls one. It's a pretty low
No,
bar.
no, it's 100% different tone. It looks almost like uh, it looks more like Stephen King's like the latest It film than
Oh, that'll be cool.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to get back on topic of the
Yes.
apologetics thing, do you have any like apologists who you really respect on the theist side of things?
Um, Apologists I respect. So I would say there are people who I think have good intentions. So I respect Mike Licona. I respect in his own way. I respect Sean McDowell. Sometimes he's a little off, but his book on the death of the apostles was surprisingly refreshing and like letting Christians know that a lot of the arguments that they've historically used are bad. Um, that was really refreshing. Um, like I think Gary Habermas is a good person. Um, and then like when it comes to the YouTube people, like Braxton Hunter and we have a lot in common. Like as people, um, I think I don't think his ideas are good. We disagree. I don't think he makes good arguments. He doesn't think I make good arguments, so that's fine. Um, I'm trying to avoid. There's no point in me telling people who I don't. I don't think there's any positive things to saying people I don't respect. But
What? You're not a fan of Ken Ham? I thought you guys were just so close friends.
well, I don't mind saying that the young Earth creationists I don't respect in terms of their intellectual rigor or their tactics. I feel like a lot of them are doing it for cash. But in terms of, I don't even consider. Do you consider young Earth creationists apologists?
Well, I just consider the apologia just any term that means apologizing for the stuff that doesn't make sense in the Bible. So they would
Okay.
fit
Well,
into that.
then you're right. Yeah. Um, uh, I'm just sorry. I'm going through my head and thinking, no, I don't respect that person. No, I don't respect that person. I'll stick with the list I gave. I mean, um, I think I like the approach that people like Cameron Bertuzzi and Mike Winger take. I don't know that I necessarily agree with. Obviously, I don't agree with their conclusions, and I'm not sure they're as rigorous as they think they are. But I like them as people. I think they're doing good work. Um, yeah.
And one of the people I respect most is Pete Inns, who you mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think he'd be great. I'd like to see you and him have a conversation on Shannon's channel or your channel. So I think you should definitely reach out to him, and it'd be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I would actually love him to. His ideas, of course, within the church, um, are very divisive as well. So that actually would be fascinating because his views are very much not the same views that I held when I was a Christian, even though I held him up earlier as someone I really respect. So yeah, and if you are a theist and you want to look for books to expand your mind, his books are really good.
Yeah, I mean, in our conversation, I was just like agreeing with everything he said. Like, yep, yep, that's great.
Hmm.
Yep, yep. Wait, you're a theist, huh? What? Damn it, I'm
Right,
about to
right, right,
convert.
exactly. But he doesn't hold to the same. inerrancy in the same way most people hold to it. And so he gives himself some room for God to have mystery, and so therefore can embrace a bigger set of ideas, or doesn't have to be threatened by as many ideas as some people do.
Right. Yeah, I think his position is the most intellectually honest theist position I think I've met.
Yep.
So, do you have any advice for like aspiring content creators? Like, how can they improve, grow, network, those kinds of things?
A few different things. So I would say the first one is in terms of what content you're producing. Um, the more it's counterintuitive, but the more niche you are, the more popular you can become. If you become, if you're just doing vague responses that you can see on a lot of channels, it's going to be hard for you to stand out. I think when I started my channel, for example, like I was like laser focused. It was just Ken Ham and Eric Hovind, and it was like it kind of became almost known that like, oh well, Paul's probably going to handle this Ken Ham or Eric Hovind thing. I was able to branch out from there because that wasn't the only thing I was interested in. When you start, you have to kind of get to be known for something to grow. If you're as great as a generalist is, it's hard. It's hard for people to get excited about what you're doing if they don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. I mean, you're really known for the debates and the conversations you do. You don't do general stuff. I mean, I think people kind of know what TJump is about. Um, the and then on the technical side of things, don't worry about a lot of the technical stuff. Like if it, just point your phone at you. Your phone is good enough for YouTube. If you want to invest in something, invest in a microphone. But other than that, um, Rick Rick McCallum, the producer of the prequels, used to, whenever I would hear him give this answer to people, he would be like, "Stop thinking about making. If you want to make movies, stop thinking about it and just start making movies." He's like, and don't even like. He didn't care if you go to school, didn't whatever, because the only way you get better at doing something is by doing it. You have to. You don't get in shape without ever doing your first sit-ups. You know, so if you want to make content, just start doing it. Don't think about it anymore. Just start. I don't know. I know it's a weird just do it methods, but
Uh,
anyway.
Put like a little clip of what's his Shia LaBeouf. Just do
Oh
it.
yeah, should I just do it? Yeah. So find your niche, and make sure also, if you really want to do it, make sure that you're picking something that you are actually the most passionate about, because uh, this will just become a grind if it's not the thing you like to do best. People will be able to tell. You can't fake it for the long term. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. So we've been going for about an hour. Thanks for coming on.
Okay.
This was a great
Yeah.
conversation. Love to talk with you again sometime. I definitely
A
want to see
pleasure.
you.
Anytime.
Yeah, I definitely want to see you talk with Pete in. So please contact
Okay.
him.
All right. Well, we'll make that happen maybe on Shannon's channel. We'll see what she says.
Awesome. Well, I
Cool.
am gonna get some more coffee, and you said you're out of coffee too.
Yeah, and I'm out of coffee and I got it back to work. This was my lunch break, so
Awesome.
all good. All right.
Talk to you later.
Have a good day, sir.
You too. Bye.